I started hearing myself through the wall on a Tuesday, which felt wrong immediately because Tuesdays were the one day of the week that never changed. Same shift, same dinner, same late night scroll through the same pointless feeds. The building was quiet in that tired way old buildings get, like it had seen enough of people and was just waiting them out. I live alone. I've lived alone long enough that I know every sound this apartment makes. The brittle click of the fridge cycling, the thin whine in the pipes at 2 a.m., the neighbor on the other side of my bedroom who coughs like he's been dying for years, but somehow never does. There shouldn't have been anything new. I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a crack in the laminate, thinking about absolutely nothing important, when from behind the wall to my left, I heard my own voice say, clear as if I'd spoken it aloud, "Don't touch that." I hadn't moved. My hand was halfway between my lap and the table. I froze and watched my fingers complete the motion on their own, reaching for the glass in front of me. Only after the voice said it did, I actually touched the glass. That sequence bothered me more than the fact I'd heard myself. Voice, then action. Not action, then echo. I sat there, hand around the glass, heart giving that slow, heavy thud it gives when adrenaline doesn't quite know what to do with itself. And listened. Nothing. Just the soft electrical hum behind the drywall, and the drip of the faucet I'd been ignoring for weeks. I told myself I'd misheard. Misfired thought, imagined replay, whatever. The kind of thing sleep deprivation does when you stack enough nights on top of each other. I stood up to go to bed. As I walked past the wall toward the hallway, the voice said, from that same patch of plaster, "You're going to look." Same timbre, same half-bored cadence, same tiny rasp on the army. And exactly 1 second later, like I was following directions I hadn't agreed to, I stopped, turned, and looked at the wall. There's something uniquely wrong about hearing your own voice from somewhere. Your throat isn't. You don't realize how much you trust the geometry of sound until it breaks. I stepped closer. The paint was cheap, matte, slightly rough under my fingertips. Cold. I pressed my ear against it, feeling stupid, feeling like a kid, expecting to hear the faint, muffled roar of someone else's TV. Instead, I heard breathing. My breathing. Inhale, pause, exhale. Two perfectly synced. I held my breath. On the other side, the breathing continued. Slow, calm, patient. The hairs on my arms rose in a single wave. "Who's there?" I said, because the script in my head didn't have any better lines. "Who's there?" My own voice replied from the wall. Not after me, not as an echo, but a fraction of a beat before I finished the word, "there." Like it knew what I was going to ask and got there first. I stepped back so fast the chair behind me scraped. A rational mind is a fragile thing. It doesn't shatter all at once. It just starts making smaller, cheaper explanations. Speaker in the wall, old recording, some prank, someone on a call next door, except there was no next door on that side. Left of my kitchen is the stairwell, and beyond that, according to the floor plan, and the board guy in the building office, a sealed storage unit that hasn't been opened in at least a decade. No tenants, no wiring for intercoms, just concrete, pipe, and neglect. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, the wall to that side like a person lying shoulder to shoulder with me, quiet, awake. Every time I felt myself drifting off, I'd jolt, convinced I'd hear myself again. The second time it happened, I was in the shower the next evening. The water pressure in this building is a joke. It comes out in thin needles that make everything feel colder than it should. I was rinsing shampoo from my hair when, through the steady white noise of the water, I heard my voice from the other side of the bathroom wall say, "You always miss that spot." I flinched so hard, I slipped, caught myself on the curtain rod, heart slamming. I ran my hand over the back of my head and found a dry patch of hair, still foamy. I hadn't noticed it yet. The voice had been right. I turned the water off. For a moment, the only sounds were the drip off my elbows and the deep, soft ticking of the pipes cooling. Then a single knuckle tapped the wall beside the shower. 3 times. The same rhythm I use when I knock on a door. "Stop it," I said. I don't know if I was talking to whoever was on the other side or to myself. "Stop what?" it replied, immediately this time. No delay, no lag. Perfect conversational timing. If you've ever heard a recording of yourself and hated it, multiply that by 100 and then imagine the recording talking back in real time. I got out, dressed in the kind of shaking hurry you laugh off later if you make it that far, and spent an hour walking the hallways, trying doors, counting steps. On the other side of my walls, there was nothing. Stairs, electrical riser, locked metal door with a rusted seal that cracked visible dust when I touched it. I lifted my phone to the gap and took a picture through the sliver of darkness. When I checked, the photo was black. Not low light grain, not shapes, not the faint geometry of pipe and wall. Just pure digital absence, as if the sensor hadn't just failed but refused. That night, the voice spoke to me while I was scrolling through old photos. I have this habit where I scroll all the way to the bottom of my gallery and go up, like climbing out of a pit. The farther back I went, the less I recognized. Places I barely remembered. People I didn't talk to anymore. One of the earliest photos, a blurry shot of my first crappy apartment, refused to open. The thumbnail was there, but tapping it did nothing. My phone didn't freeze. The system didn't hang. It just silently refused. "You deleted those," the voice said, casual, like we were sharing a drink. "What are you doing?" I asked, my throat dry. "Watching," it said. "Finishing." "Finishing what?" A pause, then. "You." I laughed. Came out wrong, too loud in the small room. "Yeah? That's supposed to be scary?" "I'm not trying to scare you," it said. And the way it said it, irritated, like I was missing the point. Felt like every argument I'd ever had with myself at 3 in the morning. "I'm trying to keep the delay manageable." I started recording the sounds. I'm not an audio engineer, but I know enough to read a waveform. Every time I heard the voice, I'd hit record and mark the moment I spoke versus the response. The pattern was there once I forced myself to look. At first, when I said something, it would respond a fraction of a beat before me, then a half second, then a full one. It was always ahead, always slightly out in front of my thoughts, my words, my movements. Not a reflection, not a replay, a lead. It knew when I was going to stand up. It knew when my hand would reach for the fridge. It knew the sentence I was about to say, and had already said it, slightly differently, slightly more confidently, as if my version were the correction instead of the original. After a week, my own life started to feel like the dubbed version of someone else's movie. The world went on. Work, commute, meaningless meetings. The building stayed indifferent. But I began to notice small discrepancies that had never bothered me. A mug I was sure I'd broken months ago, back on the shelf. A shirt I didn't remember buying, hanging in my closet, in exactly the place I would have put it. Texts from numbers I didn't recognize, that nonetheless referenced things I remembered thinking but not saying. "Did you change your mind?" one of them said, with no prior thread. "About what?" I typed, then deleted. I never replied. As I was staring at the screen, the wall said, in my voice, "You said yes yesterday." That was when a different kind of fear started. A cold, abstract one, like looking at a pattern from a distance and realizing it's been there the whole time. "Who are you?" I asked the wall that night, sitting with my back to it. Lights off, Apartment lit only by the glow from the street lamp outside. I'm you, it said. What does that mean? I'm the version that finished. Finished what? The sentence. It let that hang for a moment, then added, the life. There are ways to tell someone is lying, even when you can't see their face. Tiny delays, inconsistencies. My own voice had none. It was unbearably honest. You died 3 weeks ago, it added, matter of fact. I've been waiting for you to catch up. People imagine death as a moment, the cut, a line, a before and after. They don't think about lag, about a consciousness that doesn't realize the signal has already been cut and keeps trying to buffer reality on a memory that's no longer connected. I didn't believe it, of course, not immediately. You don't just take a voice in your wall at its word. But I started checking things I'd never felt the need to check. Bank login, last successful access, time-stamped days before I remembered using it. Security camera in the lobby, footage where people walked in and out. The door opened, the light changed. But I never appeared, even though I remembered crossing that frame. My reflection in the elevator, slightly behind the movement I thought I was making, like a video stream on a bad connection. The more I looked, the more it felt like the world had quietly stopped acknowledging me and was just politely letting me drift. Why me? I asked the wall, on what I think was the 10th day since that first "don't touch that." Why do this to me? You did it, it said. You took too long. The cadence of my own self-loathing, weaponized. Too long for what? To decide. I waited, but it didn't elaborate. Apparently some rhythms I had to discover myself. It escalated the night the wall moved. Not much, not dramatically. No cracking plaster, no bleeding cracks. Just a subtle, wrong shift in perspective. Standing in the hallway between the kitchen and bathroom. The wall that had always been flat now seemed to tilt inward by a degree you wouldn't measure with tools. Only with the oldest part of your brain that hates crooked lines in places that used to be straight. You feel that? It asked. What are you? I whispered. An adjustment, it said. A correction, a future tense trying to pry a present out of the past. You're late. You were supposed to stop existing quietly. And if I don't, I asked. If I just keep going? You don't keep going, it said. You smear, you echo. You make noise in rooms that have already been empty. Someone has to clean that up. It took me a while to understand the worst part. It wasn't threatening me. It was describing work. Maintenance. Like explaining why a corrupt file has to be deleted so the system doesn't hang. What are you cleaning? I asked finally. The part of you that still thinks it's the first draft, it said. You're not. You're a rerun. The universe forgot to switch off. I stopped going to work. Stopped answering what little was left of my life outside those walls. I sat in the dark and listened to myself living ahead of me. One night, hungry and not really caring, I reached into the cupboard for the jar of peanut butter that had been sitting there since forever. As my fingers brushed the rough lid, the voice from the wall said, quiet, almost gentle, "You're going to drop that." I froze. My grip tightened. Something in me, petty and stubborn and human, decided there and then that I would not. I would not obey a version of myself that thought it knew better. I lifted the jar. My fingers went numb. For a split second, it felt like someone else owned my hand. The jar slipped, hit the edge of the counter, and burst open on the floor. Sticky mess everywhere. The voice sighed. Not dramatically, not in triumph. Just tired. It's not control, it said. It's prediction. You're not strong enough to break probability. Then why are you talking to me? I asked, blood pounding loud enough to drown out everything else. Because you almost did, it said. Once, on a different branch. And that crack is still here. You're the afterimage of a decision. You weren't supposed to be this loud. The apartment felt too small after that. Every surface a reminder that something had already walked here in front of me, spoken my sentences better than I could, moved through my days like a rehearsal I'd ruined. I stood in the center of the kitchen, turned slowly, trying to find a place the voice wouldn't reach. There wasn't one. What happens if I just stop? I asked. Stop moving, stop talking. Just lie down and wait. You've already done that, it said. That's the problem, we're sinking. You're almost at the point where you remember the end. Once you do, you won't be able to pretend you're the original anymore. I saw it then, not with my eyes, but with that inner sense that recognizes a shape before light hits it. A road, a wet night, headlights. A moment of indecision that lasted exactly a fraction too long. The world folding. The thought I'd had at the last possible second. I should have turned back hours ago. And then nothing. There are many kinds of horror. The one that got me wasn't the crash, the pain, the idea of my own body broken open on the asphalt. It was the realization that everything since had been an echo sliding along the wall of reality, a smear my own mind refused to admit was no longer attached to anything. So what now? I asked. My voice sounded thin, even to me. Now you let go, it said. You stop trying to overwrite a timeline that already closed. And if I don't? On the other side of the wall, something leaned closer. I didn't hear it move. I just felt the pressure, like a hand pressed flat against the back of my life. You will, it said. Not because I make you, because there's nowhere left to go. You're running out of delay. The wall felt warm under my palm now, not with heat, but with some kind of presence, like a second pulse. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I tried to imagine that all of this was a psychotic break, that there were doctors and meds and explanations waiting if I just reached out. But the world on the other side of that wall felt too coherent, too structured. If it was madness, it was a kind that knew more about me than I'd ever wanted to learn. What are you going to do when I'm gone? I asked, stalling in the oldest human way. The same thing you're trying to do now, it said. Forget. Silence settled between us, thick and almost peaceful. For the first time since it started, the voice didn't rush ahead of me. It waited. I thought about the mug that shouldn't exist, the photos that wouldn't open, the security footage where I was the only missing element. Maybe the world had already forgotten me. Maybe I was the last one holding on to the idea that I mattered. Okay, I said, though I wasn't sure who I was answering. Then, catch me. I don't know if I fell or folded or simply stopped resisting. I only know that the next breath I took didn't scrape against the inside of my ribs. It moved cleanly, like air does, in a place where it belongs. The wall in front of me felt farther away, like I'd stepped back without moving. For a second, just a second, I heard two versions of my voice overlapping from both sides of the plaster. One said, with relief, "Finally." The other whispered, very softly, "I hear you." And then, somewhere between them, I stopped being the one who was late.